Alrighty, so have I become an inadvertent Stoic? Am I a Stoic and didn't know it? I should add here, I am no philosopher, though I do have a tendency to occasionally philosophize. I am not a Stoic, I don't think. But I suspect I follow many of the Stoic principles, and really have only started to follow them over the last couple of years since the creation of Evolution of Dave. But here's my thoughts on some of the stuff that I now do that I think have certainly caused me to be an inadvertent Stoic in part. If you think back to my wake-up call back at the end of 2017, which kickstarted my YouTube channel around about February, March 2018. This wake up was, I'm so grateful for this wake up because it caused me to think very differently, and it also caused me to want to be a better version of myself by looking at my physical health, my mental health, and making improvements. I continue to make these improvements, but I have to say everything that I've done so far that I stick with, bearing in mind I've tried lots of different things, everything that works I still do on a day-to-day basis. Some of those elements, some of those practices, those methods will absolutely fall into the Stoic ideas. When you think of prudence, or rather wisdom, in a sense, over the last couple of years, my insatiable appetite for learning falls absolutely into that category, and I still have it, and I know that it will continue with me for the rest of my life. And I should add here, at no point will I ever think that I've discovered it all. At no point will I ever consider myself a guru. At no point will I ever consider my journey has come to an end, because life is all about this continual learning process through experiences, things that work. You know, if others might call them mistakes or failures, I certainly don't, and I just consider them a challenging learning experience. And believe me, I've had lots. Over the last couple of years, I really have had loads. This year has been the hardest year of my life, and I don't say that with any kind of sensationalist statement. This really has been an incredibly tough year, which all the way through it, I've had this mental reasoning to believe, truly believe, that through going through this shit, I will come out stronger. In fact, I already have. If you think about this, the obstacle is the way. You know, in a sense, that's how I view my life now. And so I do think my somewhat optimistic view of life, my ability to now see every challenge as a learning experience, but also a determining factor in the strength of my psychology, I think that probably does fall into Stoicism as well. Every day, as you know, I wake up between 5:30 and 6. I do my 5 Tibetan rites yoga routine. I then do my Wim Hof power breathing. I then make my black coffee, and I then go outside into the garden every day of the year, and I use the garden hose to shower. And whilst I don't think everybody should do that, I think everybody should try it. Indeed, this river just behind me now is a river that every now and again I go for a swim in. In fact, let's do another video of a swim in the river there. It is a beautiful river, so long as you don't swallow too much of the water. But, you know, I think those parts of my life still, I think, fall into, again, some of the principles of Stoicism. The whole idea of creating a routine, a practice that makes you get up out of bed. I know that Marcus Aurelius pondered on that, the whole idea of staying in bed and whether he should stay in bed because it's nice and cozy and warm and comfortable versus whether he should get out of bed and go to work. And of course he reasons that of course he should get up and go to work. That's what it is to be a human. It is nice to be comfortable, but a bit like anything in life, drinking alcohol, eating fatty foods, or not fatty foods, sugary foods, everything in small doses is absolutely fine. But as soon as you surpass those limits, then of course they have a detrimental effect on your health. And that is absolutely the case of sleeping, of course. Sleeping is essential for living. And in fact, they talk about this whole idea that some people can live off 4 hours a night. I think there's been some recent studies that indicate that those individuals are actually suffering, even though they don't believe it. So the whole idea of Margaret Thatcher in this country having the 4-hour sleep, whether that's true or not, in the end she suffered. And in fact, I think she did die of some kind of chronic illness. But anyway, the point is, sleep is essential, it is important. You should aim for 7 to 8 hours a night. And so therefore, if every day you had that feeling of wanting to stay in bed and be comfortable and doze, in the end, that's not going to do you any good. It's okay every now and again, but if that is your feeling, especially if you're a student, in fact, if you're a student and you're watching this in bed and it's now 8 o'clock, get out of bed. And believe me, you will benefit by doing this. Get out of bed, create a routine. It will strengthen your character. That simple practice of getting out of bed, making your bed, that alone, although it's so simple, is incredibly beneficial to your brain, because it's this whole task completion, which I think probably hails back to the kind of the military. So then we've got virtue itself and living a life morally. And that absolutely was a key element to Stoicism. In fact, I put a video out to my LinkedIn following, posing the question, can you be virtuous in business? Which of course the answer is yes, you can, but today it is a lot harder to be. Maybe not even just today, maybe it's always been tough in business, because there are always people that are going to test your virtuous way of thinking. Only recently I had a client whom didn't want to pay the fee. Once I'd carried out some work for them, they didn't want to pay the fee. I've had a former employee in my other business who turned out to be somewhat fraudulent. His whole life was a fraud, which in the end, now I look back, although it was a tough situation to deal with at the time, now I look back with some amusement. And I hope that someday he figures life out. He was almost a Walter Mitty. That would probably be a good way of describing him. Unfortunately, he'd created so many lies that he'd started to believe them. One of the things that I've had to do over this last couple of years is accept the things that I cannot change. Again, one of the Stoic ideas is exactly that. In other words, it is quite typical of us humans to fight against things that, as soon as you just accept them for what they are, your life becomes a lot simpler. But during a process of wishing something to be different, wishing your life to be different, and you constantly fight against this problem, then of course what typically happens is that you only make the problem worse. Your mindset is too negative, it's too clogged to be able to deal with the situation. It's quite often a predicament that cannot be solved. So therefore, although it might be hard at the time, the sooner you just accept it for what it is and move on, the easier your life becomes. In many occasions this year, in the last year, I've had to surrender to what is. Some really tough situations, some really tough predicaments. I've had to finally, exhale and just think, okay, fine. Let's just go with what it is. Let's just accept the problem and move on. And a few days later, lo and behold, your life becomes somewhat simpler. Your brain is not having to deal with that problem, which it can't solve. It's funny when you wake up in the morning, and the great thing about the brain, as we know, during sleep, and specifically those REM sleep moments that we have, that is your brain's ability, and why sleep is so important, but that is your brain's time, and it's your brain's ability to look at the problems that you've accrued throughout the day and work them out, so that when you wake up in the morning, you have this aha moment. I had one this morning, in fact. However, if the problems are insurmountable, if the problems are so big that your brain can't work them out, quite often what happens is you have disturbed sleep, you wake up and you're feeling worse. Those are the times, those are the instances probably where you need to just accept that problem for what it is and move on. So, the more I think about it, I am adopting these Stoic principles without knowing it. Should I call myself the Inadvertant Stoic? I don't know, because I don't think every single one of the Stoic principles are really me. But just like I do with everything in my life, I mix it up. I try things. If I like them, I keep them, and they become part of my daily practice. But I don't ever want to label myself as a thing, as a type of person. When I think about the exercise that I do, I mix it up. Many of the exercises I do are calisthenic based. They're body weight exercises. In my office, I've got a punch bag behind me. I use a focus ball whenever I want to work on coordination. I juggle occasionally. Every now and again, I have a little jog. So, I mix it up. I swim, I climb occasionally, boulder. So that to me is my philosophy to life, mixing everything up. And one of the interesting Stoic ideas I know is to not worry about other people. But I guess this is where I do worry about other people, but I don't worry about what other people think. I'd have to say, even before 2 years ago, I'd stopped caring about what other people think. That's only strengthened over the last couple of years. I really don't give a monkeys about how people view me, whether my opinions are different to theirs. It really doesn't bother me. But I know that in my early 20s, I did have a problem with that. I know that I struggled with that. I cared about what people thought about me. That is quite typical, I know, of those folk in their 20s. I think if you are in your early 20s and you figured that bit out, then well done you. Anyway, hope you like the change of scenery, this lovely river that occasionally you do see the odd heron, the odd kingfisher, in fact, if you're lucky. And as you know, if you've been watching my journey, I spend much of my life out in nature, in the woods, and it's where I'm happiest. It's where I feel most calm, at one, you might say. Anyway, Evolution of Dave signing off. I hope that wasn't too much of a ramble. TTFN, bye for now.